This is Jeff Neville for Selective Imagery. Welcome to Joy and Despair at Huntington Beach State Park. We'll start things out on a positive note and enjoy this sunrise as the sun is starting to illuminate the sky behind the tree line on the marsh side of the park. You really can't complain too much when you see this first thing in the morning. This is around 6 o'clock, 6:15 a.m. And a few pictures of clouds in another area that are illuminated with wonderful color. We start off with some joyous things on the marsh side. The white ibis are feeding. It's low tide. There's a few areas where they can get food. This one got a crab and proceeds to gulp it right down, while this other one is in slightly deeper water, not having as much luck. Now here's a video with two white ibis and a snowy egret, which are basically just having a heyday catching small shrimp and gulping them down, as you can see. There's obviously an abundance of food in this area. They're having no problem filling their bellies. They're right next to that big clump of oysters. They do a lot of picking around that oyster bed that is vertical there. Find a lot of mudworm, find a lot of mudworms sometimes as well. And here's that one in the deeper water again. Still trying to find something. We'll watch this for a minute or two. Hello, this is Jeff Neville for Selective Imagery. I wasn't planning to do another video this week, but today is August 5th. Went to Huntington Beach State Park in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina. And so far in this video, you've seen what I would consider the joy of going to the park. And all the views that you've seen so far are on the marsh side of the causeway. The causeway is just the name of a road that splits two bodies of water. You have the salt marsh on one side, like I said, which you've seen clips of already, and then you have the other side, which is called Mullet Pond, which is brackish water, and that water level changes due to rainfall which can cause another pond, which is fresh water, to spill over into Mullet Pond. Or you can exchange water from the marsh side into Mullet Pond to adjust water levels as required. And you can have the water go either way, depending on the tide, obviously. Unfortunately, what you're about to see is the despair part of the event from today that my friend Bob was with me to observe as well, along with several others. I had written a letter to the park on April 30th, 2022, one of many people who wrote to either the park manager or the state park director, of which I wrote to both. And it was basically the concerns at the time of the artificial lowering of the water levels in Mullet Pond, which basically was beyond belief, was intentionally done. And to try to just summarize all this, myself and others had many concerns, and in part of my letter, I talked about basically that this action was done several years before, resulting in a fish kill, and then eventually they had to restore the water levels to where they were. I then referenced an article that I found on the web, which basically talked about what was occurring here, where we had a lot of algae that was now covering the pond, duckweed, other plant life that was just out of control because with the water level being so low, the light was hitting plant life that was in the water that maybe normally didn't get as much sunlight and wasn't, growing super fast. So with the water level being low, all this plant life started growing like crazy. So part of my letter, I made the comment from this article that said algae and duckweed produce oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis, vital for aquatic creatures. At night or when sunlight is not available, however, the plants consume oxygen. In certain cases, the amount of oxygen being used can exceed the amount being produced and thus results in oxygen depletion and fish kills. This often happens during hot summer months when the water is warmer and unable to hold greater amounts of oxygen, or on cloudy days where there is minimal sun. Another excerpt from my letter was, in addition, excess algae and duckweed reduces sunlight penetration and thus causes the elimination of other vegetation, unbalancing the ecosystem. And since oxygen depletion is sometimes hard to detect unless at extreme levels, keeping track of the dissolved oxygen levels in your pond with either a test kit or an oxygen meter can be extremely helpful. And I made a comment saying I didn't feel that they had the resources to adequately monitor this condition to make sure we didn't have a fish kill. Well, unfortunately today, we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of intense heat on the East Coast in general, 90 plus degree days, many a day where they said, feels like 105 or 102 or what have you. Really, really miserable, hot and humid weather, and it just hasn't let up. So these are the conditions that could cause a fish kill beyond a doubt. Now, while the water level was restored a while back, and I'm not going to say it was due to pressure from the writing campaign from the photographers or anything, but eventually the water level did get restored, and the algae depleted quite a bit. But the grasses and the plants that had grown, it isn't like they all of a sudden disappeared. They were just covered with more water and not as obvious visually to the eye when you look at the pond. Well, unfortunately today, we saw some stuff that was gut-wrenching, really, really hard to deal with, and you're going to see that in some upcoming pictures and video. And I don't know what to say other than I wrote another letter to the park, letting them know what was going on today. Made a suggestion for something that they could possibly do. Have not gotten a response yet. But unfortunately, us as humans seem to be pretty good at screwing things up. The hot weather doesn't help, but that isn't an excuse. When you have the ability to bring water in from the marsh, which is cooler and has good oxygen levels, you could do water change out and go back and forth and try to make sure that the pond water doesn't get too hot. Since without adequate rainfall, the only way you're going to basically control any kind of temperature is to introduce the water from the saltwater side of the causeway, and this was not done. So we'll move on with pictures and video. My friend notices a bad odor. We go to the pond side only to find dead fish everywhere. Here you can see pieces of an eel. Alligators probably got to some of these fish, but even they were not around in any large numbers this morning. And this is all against the bank. Basically, you would not see this unless you were on the sidewalk looking into the water. If you're driving over the causeway, you'd never see it. Here's mullet. You never see mullet like this swimming across the top of the water, basically gasping for air, trying to survive. The oxygen depletion was horrible in the pond. There were dead fish everywhere, and we continued to watch fish just die before our eyes. Here's a series of pictures, and as I'm watching this, as I'm shooting through my lens, I'm really feeling empathy for this mullet. You can't help but just imagine what it's going through as it slowly suffocates due to lack of air. It dives in the water, it stirs up the water, it tries to swim faster to get more oxygen to go across its gills, but nothing is working. It's really having a hard time. And when I got this shot where it just looked like it was just giving me a friendly look, the next shot said it all as it opens its mouth, obviously gasping for air, not knowing what else to do. Once again, it dives in the water, splashes around a bit, and as time goes on, your heart just starts to sink, knowing that this fish doesn't have much longer. An air bubble in front of the fish says it all. Just what it needs is air, oxygen. And unfortunately, within about 30 seconds of this shot, for this fish, things go black. It stops swimming, it turns upside down, and it slowly sinks to the bottom of the pond, along with many others that we saw having the same thing happen to them. And it wasn't just fish. When do you see shrimp on the top of the water struggling to get air? You don't see shrimp on the top of the water. It doesn't happen. Not around here. And then there were eels and small fish. Creatures that you don't think use that much oxygen. Now, in the same pond, but farther away from the bank, things look almost normal. You say, gee, this doesn't look so bad. But my mind, I can't get the memory of literally dozens and dozens of fish that we saw die in a short span of time. Never mind countless others that were floating along the edge of the bank. I can't explain to you how this makes someone feel. It's very frustrating, especially when, at least in my mind, and I'm not a scientist, but in my mind, things could have been done to mitigate this, if not eliminate this. And it just didn't happen. You know, a lot of us photographers have had discussions with members of the park. And like I said, we've written a lot of letters in the past, starting basically the end of April. And, you know, here you can see the great blue heron actually caught 2 small eels at the same time. So you can watch the end of this clip and see how it manages to handle 2. So, you know, we look at this and we're saying, well, they might as well get the eels and their food now while they can get it while it's alive, because basically these birds do not eat the dead fish. They want to catch the fish live. The only thing that I know of that will eat the dead fish and is the alligators, and we didn't even see any of those eating the fish while we were there. We hardly saw any alligators at all. You know, the pieces of fish that we saw that were in the water, no doubt were from an alligator, but that could have been, you know, any time in the last 24 hours or so. So I guess my message is, you know, we try to end this video on a positive note, show some positive images, but you need to be active, you need to be vocal, not nasty, but you just need to express your opinion. And like I said, I did write another letter, have not gotten a response. Don't know if they're going to do anything different, if they're going to try to bring some salt water in there and cool things down and get some water in there that has some decent oxygen levels. I mean, one can only tell. I don't plan on going back to the park until maybe Monday. But this is just a video in a way out of desperation, just to try to bring awareness to people to pay attention to what's going on in your local areas. Here, this laughing gull isn't laughing. It's letting us know what it thinks. And that's it for this presentation. I'm not even going to say, you know, if you like this video, give me a like, because it's a video that's tough to like. But I wish everybody the best, and thank you for letting me sound off a bit. And take care.